Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events podcast. This is Mary Davidson, one of your co-hosts, and in today's episode, we're talking all about bartending at events, what every event planner or host should know with Neil Ratliff, our guest. So we're going to get all into the goodness about beverages and perspectives on that through events. So we've learned a lot from this episode, and so we hope that you will too. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Before we get into this week's episode, we do want to remind you that we're hosting the first ever Better Events Conference this December on Wednesday, December 20th. We're going to hold it virtually so you can join us from anywhere in the world, and we want to see you. We want to meet you. We're going to share knowledge. It's going to be a facilitated conversation and time for you to make for yourself as an event professional. So if you're interested in learning more when tickets go on sale, you want to partner with us or speak, please go to our website at bettereventspod.com/conference. And we are so excited to bring you the first ever conference, folks. But without further ado, let's get back into the episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm your co-host, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson. And this week, we are talking all about bartending at events with our guest, Neil Ratliff. And we want to save as much time as possible for this interview. So we're just going to jump right in, and I'm going to introduce Neil to all of you listeners. Neil Ratliff started City Cocktails in his one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, Washington in 2016. They have since expanded to Oregon, California, and Idaho, where they execute 400 events a year. Neil, is there anything you want to add to your lovely intro?
No, that was enough. I think you can tell by my face we're at about 400 events a year right now. So that was perfect. Thank you.
Oh, we really appreciate you taking the time. And we like to start off with this little, why we asked our guest. And so Logan and I were at a conference, I believe it was last year, and we saw Neil speak. It was an event for event professionals here in Seattle. And we loved his insights on events and the energy around events from the cocktail perspective at that time. And so we wanted to bring him on this podcast today to share some tips about a great beverage experience for your guests and just making the whole planning process easier for event planners when working with vendors like you. And so we're excited for our conversation. And with that, we kind of like to start basic with our questions for our guests. So we'd love to just learn more about you and your event experience. So how did you get started in events?
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. It comes from disappointment. So I moved out to Seattle in 2012 to do my master's at the UW. Go Dogs. And of course, after I graduated and spent all that money, I sent out probably 500 resumes. I don't think I got a single email back. And while I was doing that, I was working full-time as the lead bartender at a place called Blue Acre Seafood downtown, which is unfortunately post-pandemic no longer with us. That sounded like they died. They're fine. They're just close. And I was the lead bartender there. And a lot of my clients and regulars were, executives at, I don't know if we should say the company names, but large companies that are based in Seattle, Washington. And I got asked all the time to come bartend like their private parties in their downtown condos and stuff like that. And I would always have to decline because I was going to graduate school and then working full time, like during the weekends. So rejection, realizing that I just had a piece of paper that really didn't mean anything. And I don't know that there was a single moment, but there was just kind of this overarching feeling where, I've been working for someone else since I was 15 years old. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't work for somebody else. So I looked at the market and I realized that with event bartenders around Washington, it was either you could pay $15,000 and get like a bus to come and bartend your wedding, or it was like a dude on Craigslist that wore jeans and brought Solo cups, and there was nothing in the middle. And that's where I decided our lane would be. And it's worked out. I'm no longer in the 1-bedroom apartment.
We love to hear that. That's such a good origin story. It sounds like you already had a business before you knew you needed a business.
Yeah, I just kind of, the first year was a blur, and I just kind of woke up and realized how much work I had put in and that it was paying off. So I'm very happy about it. I'm also very tired, but I'm very happy about it.
We'll go with the happy over tired, but I feel like you can't have one really without the other. But we like to also help with our listeners just defining terms. So we're talking about event bartending, but can you explain what is event bartending and like what kind of events do you work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do specifically bartending. There's a lot of overlap in the event industry. A lot of caterers are starting to offer their own bar services. Some bar services offer things like event staffing or equipment rental. We don't do any of that. And I was actually inspired by, I forget his first name. It was definitely a dude. Whoever started Heinz Ketchup. His entire business model and his entire ideology for business was just do one thing really well. They just freaking made ketchup. That's all they did. And it's like the best ketchup. So that was my lane. I didn't want to do anything else. So we provide bar services for the majority of our business is weddings, but we do a lot of corporate events. Pre-pandemic, we had a very large contract for experiential marketing, pop-up bars, and things of that nature. We've done it all. I've worked parties. I worked a baby shower a couple years ago where it was 8 people and only one of them drank. So literally the guy just hired me to serve him drinks for a few hours. It was fantastic. I'll never forget that. All the way up to, we've done festivals, and we do large Indian weddings of 700-800 people. So we run the gamut, and we specifically stay in that lane of just handling the beverages for any event.
That's amazing. And by the way, the founder of Heinz is Henry Heinz.
That sounds right. It
Just
sounds like a
sounds
Henry.
right?
It
Yeah.
sounded very reasonable. Henrys are usually very reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great to hear. And then also, when you're working with event planners and hosts, what's something that you wish that they knew about bringing on a bartending company?
Boy, oh boy. How much
Here we
time we
go.
got? We got time. Okay, here we go. First off, I didn't we launched right into questions. Congratulations on season 3. Just so you guys, yeah, I wanted to say that.
Thank
Like,
you.
good for you guys. Anything that lasts, after starting a business myself, anything that lasts for 3 years, 3 seasons, 3 anything, you're doing something right. So congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Now let's go into it. I was thinking about this ever since you guys told me I'd be on the podcast. And I think what I have decided, the most important thing that coordinators should do, maybe not know, but do, if you have Netflix, are you ready for this? It's not going to make any sense at first. Watch Trainwreck Woodstock 99. Every single coordinator, planner, anyone who's in charge of events absolutely must watch this. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense at first. You're going to see a lot of Limp Bizkit. This might not make sense at first. I've watched it through 3 times. The first time I watched it for nostalgia. It happened when I was 15 years old. It was the biggest story of that year. Everybody remembers Woodstock 99 and the calamity that it was. And then I went back and watched it a second time. And I realized that as soon as I was watching it a second time, I was watching it from the perspective of an event planner and an event vendor. And it's such a perfect case study in absolute idiocy of planning any kind of event. And if you start watching this, if you guys go into this from the view of an event planner, you will just cringe from start to finish. And I think the first time you'll cringe is when they're scoping out, it's the guy from the original Woodstock 69, and they were scoping out a place to throw their festival, and they chose a military base that was all tarmac. So when you're looking at it from an event planner, you're going, where is the shade? And then it goes into it in the absolute chaos. They had no water. They had no shade. They had no trash vendors. They didn't have a clear kind of ideology for their food vendors, all of this stuff. And I promise you, if you watch it from the perspective of an event, and from the perspective of an event planner, Woodstock Trainwreck 99 is the absolute best thing that every coordinator should watch. And you will see what not to do. And you'll also get some Limp Biscuit in the background.
I'm sweating just hearing you say that, because I did watch it and I think I was just like, it was a horror movie if you're an event person. It's just watching horror unfold after unfold, and then it's even like how they dealt with the chaos. And like, if you work in PR, you should watch this. Like it. Well, Mary, if you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend.
I'll put it on the list for sure. Absolutely.
You will cringe immediately. They literally show like the shot from the helicopter as they're checking out this place. And you're looking at it going, that is just pitch black tarmac everywhere. What in the world? And they threw it in July, of course, in New York, upstate New York. And it's just an absolute catastrophe. And it's a perfect case study. If I was a professor or taught some sort of professional class on event planning, I would make everybody watch that before they showed up for the first day. It would be on the syllabus.
So good. What else do you have from like your perspective for event bartending do you think folks need to know? I feel like we've defined what it is. Are there some best practices for working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things you want to do now, I have a monthly, what I call a monthly venting session with one of my favorite coordinators. Shout out to Shiloh from the Bubbly Soiree. We have like a monthly venting session where we call each other up. She tells me everything that went wrong during that month. I tell her everything that went wrong during my month, and we just get it out of our systems. We just had that this week. It was wonderful. I highly recommend doing that. Everyone do that. Just have a venting buddy and have like a monthly check-in and get it off your chest. Cheaper than therapy, and they'll understand it more. One of the things you have to know, especially, so I'm coming to you from Seattle, and I realize that people are listening all over the country, all over the world, and I'm originally from Orlando, Florida. So what you have to know, the first thing you have to know, I think, after watching Trainwreck, is the laws. Washington and Oregon are two of the most heavily regulated states. Some would call them a nanny state when it comes to alcohol service. You need state permits. There are insurance regulations. We are in Washington and Oregon. The bartender is culpable for things like overservice, serving minors, things like that. Like here's an example. In the state of Washington, if someone comes up to you and asks for a drink and they are intoxicated, clearly showing the signs of intoxication, not only do you have to deny them, which you can obviously do discreetly, you are also obligated to remove their drink, which as just thinking about trying to take the drink out of a grown man's hands in Florida is about as scary as it gets. Alligators are nothing. Try to take a beer out of a grown man's hands in Florida. So the first thing that coordinators really need to know is that the state laws that apply to alcohol service. Like I tell all of my employees, alcohol is the most powerful drug. Will you overdose more quickly from fentanyl? Probably. But you can't get fentanyl at grocery stores and corner markets and at every single American event that happens. So I always remind my employees that we are working with a very, very, very powerful drug, causes people to lose inhibitions, causes people to act recklessly, say things they wouldn't normally say, do things they wouldn't normally do, act how they wouldn't normally act. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And another thing I would ask of coordinators is ask the client, before you reach out to us, ask the client and what we've already talked through with them, what we've already provided to them. I call it the Tuesday freakout. We so often have done hours of consultation with a client, given them a very detailed checklist, answered all of their questions, gone through A to Z, all of the regulations, what to expect, all of these things. And then we hear from a coordinator the Tuesday before their Saturday wedding. And I call it the Tuesday freakout. I realize that's a slight, so I'm sorry if anybody finds that offensive, but we so often get these emails from coordinators that are asking us to go over everything from start to finish, just a few days before the event, before the wedding, before the corporate event, before the festival. And I have to tell them, one of the first things I say is, what has the client provided to you already and gone over? And they go, oh, I don't have any of that information. Well, it's ask the client first and see what we've already gone over. Because I promise you, after 7 years of doing this, I've answered those questions. I know what they're going to ask. I know what they need to know. So just trust our experience a little bit and communicate with your client and see what we may have already provided them as far as information. Those would be my main takeaways for sure.
As soon as you said Tuesday freakout, I was like, I know what he's gonna say. So, but that was it was honestly a true reminder. You're really bringing it because that's true. You're not wrong. So, thank you for that. Those are some really great tips. And then also, as we're thinking through things that event planners or people involved in events should know, what are some common mistakes that you see people make when it comes to drinks?
Maybe the first one would be, and I'm sorry to be so negative, I hope these are helpful. They're just helpful criticisms. Let me back up and say that 98% of all the coordinators and event planners that we work with are wonderful people. You can always tell when you're going to have a great day when you meet the coordinator for the first time and they're wearing Nikes. I know they're going to be great. If they're wearing high heels, I gotta ask questions. But if they're rocking Nikes and ready to rock and roll, I know that we're going to have a good day. First off, communicate. Trust us. I'll give you that when we get on site, myself or my employees, we give ourselves lots of time, far more than the industry standard. For example, for weddings, we show up 2 hours before the ceremony, which gives us about 2.5 hours of setup. I will give you that 5 or 10 minutes when I arrive. I'm going to introduce you to myself first. I'll give you that 5 minutes. Tell me what's up. Like, you want to chat a little bit? Do you want to talk through anything? Let's do it. Let's start off on the right foot. So first off, just let's meet as soon as I get there, and let's just go over it and get a good vibe going. That's always good. Again, to throw it back, know that we are obligated by very, very, very strict state regulations as far as alcohol service. Also know that, we do this delicate dance in what we do, whereas, we work for the client, we're contracted by the client, but that's just one part of a matrix. We are working with venue owners. We are working with your coordinator. We're working with DJs. We're working with the caterers. We're working with the florist. We're working with, your friends and family who are asking us questions. So, I guess what I'm saying there is just also know that there is other relationships that we have to worry about, so, especially if you're asking us to do something that's not normal or not in our contract or something like that, just know that, we are the relationship that we have with venue owners is probably the most important for business and just for go along, get along kind of relationship. So just know that we are under a strict set of rules, not just from laws, but also perhaps venue owners and other things. So just, I guess my main point would be ask questions. If you're unsure, ask me questions. Hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Please don't start ordering. Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Please don't start changing the timeline. Please don't, kind of tell us that we're going to be set up in a different area than we described, or that we're going to use different equipment than we described, or something like that. Come at me with questions, and I promise you, we'll answer them and we'll get it done. So ask questions, I think is a great takeaway from that question.
Yeah, we're a big fan of questions here on the podcast. And I feel like both of us as planners love being the queen of questions at times. But I feel like one question for you, Neil, I was like, can you ever have too much ice?
Oh my Lord, what a fantastic question. So we do, especially with wedding clients, but with every client, we do detailed menu consultation. That is always done with me personally. I do not farm that out to any employees because I know that I'm capable of answering any questions. I've been doing this for 7 years. I know what you're going to ask. I know what I need to go over. No, there's no such thing as two things, water and ice. Especially, so like I said, we do a delicate dance. We don't provide, when you book with us, we provide the expertise, consultation, customer service, equipment and materials and insurance and things like that. We do not provide the consumables in our booking price. And that's because when you book us, I have no idea what we're serving, so I can't give you a price on it. We do that after the consultation. So we do this delicate dance where we create a very detailed checklist for the client with recommended quantities on everything, very itemized, very thorough. It's 3 pages at least. And it's got all of our recommendations for everything on there. Now, I'd say about 90% of clients have us provide the ice. We buy it wholesale. It's not something you want to mess with. And you got to bring coolers at 9 a.m. when you're showing up to the site. Corporate clients are usually really good about getting stuff like Instacarted. But with wedding venues, especially in Washington and Oregon, where so many of these wedding venues are very rural and just far away from any chef store or something like that, most clients will have us provide the ice. And I can't tell you how nervous I get when the client says that they will provide the ice, because what happens is Uncle Jack shows up. We've recommended 400 pounds. He shows up with 70 and he says something like 400 pounds. That sounds crazy. It's not. It's a 6-hour wedding. There's no shade. If you would like cold drinks and want all those cocktails, I would highly recommend not skimping on this part. Skimp on the cupcakes, don't skimp on the ice or the water.
Do you feel passionately about this? I can't tell. I'm not sure.
Well, the water, I will say, so, we talk through the client and we start with, we do cocktail or beer, then wine, then spirits and cocktails. And then I go into non-alcoholic beverages. And the first thing I say, and that's why I love Logan's question there, is there's no such thing as too much water. And please, 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 it's in the contract. And I'm going to tell you again, please do not rely on us for water. Please, we have water dispensers and cups. We provide that as a courtesy in our booking price. That's mostly just for, humanity. And also, for insurance purposes. That way, if something goes wrong, we say like, hey, there was water there the entire time. We encourage guests to drink it. This also applies to venue owners. This is good overlap. So many venue owners, especially out here in Washington and Oregon, it's very often retired couples that have these great acreages, these amazing estates, and they are retired or semi-retired and decide to put in some capital and some resources and build a wedding venue and get into that. I think that's fantastic. What a way to stay busy and still enjoy these amazing properties that are around here in the Pacific Northwest. However, is there water? Is it from a well that smells like eggs? Is it known? Can clients access this water? Weddings are in the summer, guys. Is there water available there? So that's a great overlap between the client and the venue owners. Is 2 things to think about are electricity and water for sure. So yes, very passionate about it. And I'll tell you why. A couple of years ago, I had this wedding where I'll never forget it. It was 10 p.m. I think the ceremony was at like 3:30. So they'd been boozing. And of course, this was a bridesmaid. And of course, so they had been, drinking champagne in the morning. I don't think that's weird. Go for it. She came up to me at 10 p.m. as we were wrapping up. And this was a summer outdoor wedding, and said, hey, is there water available here? And I said, excuse me? And she goes, is there water here at this wedding? And I said, have you not had any water this entire day? She goes, no, I think I should drink some. I said, I think you should. So that's why it's important.
Yeah, I'm glad you delivered exactly how I hoped, Neil, because that is something that as a planner that I've done some DIY stuff that I'm like, they never remember ice and they never remember enough of it. And I used to work in China doing events, and I joke I had a guy saved in my phone as Iceman, and he was my guy that I could call, and within 15 minutes he'd ride up on a scooter with as many bags of ice as he could fit on a scooter. And the number of times I called him in a pickle, corporate, private, didn't matter. I was like, we almost always underestimated the amount of ice you needed. So just so that alone, that's a great valuable service to tell someone exactly how many pounds they need to keep things cold. How I think an interesting part too that we've seen in the industry, and this might have been happening earlier, but I feel like I've just clocked it more in the last few years, is about mocktails and having more creative kind of non-alcoholic drinks. How do you see those mocktails and non-alcoholic beverages kind of playing a part in events in the next year or so or in the future?
Only growth. I'm a recovering alcoholic myself. I really, really, really enjoy. It's not like I almost just said I really enjoy when I go to a party and there's non-alcoholic beverages available. I don't think I've been to a party in like 5 years. So it's just me and my cat, and 15-hour days back to back to back. Yes. So that kind of overlaps in two ways. One, just generally, it's such a dumb term that the media coined, but it's true and it applies. So there's the sober curious, the people that, listen to the Huberman and the Rogans of the world and go like, hey, I think I'm going to, do sober October, stuff like that. Cool. Great. Good for you. You want to talk about sobriety? We'll talk about it all afternoon, my friend. So you have that. And then also we do a lot of corporate events, especially here in Seattle and in Portland. And what are Seattle and Portland known for? Very multicultural, diverse workforces, specifically lots of Indians and lots of people from Asian countries where drinking I've noticed, especially for demographic wise, especially among women, professional women and things like that, drinking is either just not a big part of their lifestyle or they don't want to do it at work in front of their colleagues. So it's a great overlap between the bros that are doing the sober October or the designated drivers, because again, we work at all these rural venues all the time, which is great. I got stories about that. And the corporate events wherein, there's a lot of cultural, not just the office cultural, but international cultures as well, that just, they're just not going to get lit up at an office Christmas party. It's just not their thing. So we are getting asked all the time to be inventive with mocktails. And I've been a big fan. I take all my employees to the Tales of the Cocktail Festival in New Orleans every year. And last year when we went, I was incredibly impressed. I don't know if I can name drop here, but Lyres, Lyre, Lyres, they specialize in canned non-alcoholic beverages. So I've really upped my recommendation for those to clients. They're fantastic. You can get a bitters and soda, a non-alcoholic margarita. You got something in your hand. You're not missing out from the socializing. You can be at the bar. You can be where everybody's drinking, not feel weird. 5 years ago, people would ask us just to put an ice water in a cup with a lime. So people thought that they were drinking a vodka soda, which is weird. Why do we do that as people? But now there's these great pre-canned and pre-bottled options that we're really starting to see a big uptick in. So to answer your question, only growth. I see no reason why it wouldn't just continue to grow.
That's amazing. Yeah. And when we're talking about the future of events, like we kind of are right now, what else excites you? Just you've seen so many events from a different perspective. So what excites you most about the future of events in general?
I would say, especially operating in two states that were perhaps the most restrictive during COVID. Literally just watching all our businesses go up in flames overnight, losing out on 2 summer wedding seasons, really. 2021 was a little wild. There was a lot of people starting to say the hell with this and throw their weddings anyway. But if you'll recall, the Washington COVID restrictions didn't really lift that much through 2021. So to answer your question, the events themselves, they're back. Never, ever, ever forget what we went through. All of those from everyone, performers, roadies, stand-up comics, weddings, wedding vendors, corporate events, music festivals, all of these things in so many places in America and around the world, we just weren't allowed to have at all. So I tell people, don't forget, don't ever forget. Just the fact that you can have 50 people in a room now and be able to understand what they're saying, where they can drink cocktails, eat food, and have a good time. That's what makes me happy is just humans being humans and enjoying something together.
We're certainly happy to be back and getting to we still do a little virtual, but I'm like, it's good to be in a room with people. But Neil, as we kind of get close to the end, we've loved this conversation with you, but is there anything else you want to add about bartending at events that you think our listeners need to know?
Yeah, let me finish with this story. Let me say, I even wrote this down because it's my favorite story. To everyone, corporate events, planners, brides, grooms, wedding vendors, venue owners, everyone involved in events. Hey, I'm going to say it real like that radio voice. Something's going to go wrong. Don't worry about it. It's reaction. Just react to it well. The best story to end with on that note is about 3 years ago. I was at Black Diamond Gardens, one of the best venues in Washington State. The fridge that they have was behind me. I was loading up things into that fridge, got distracted, had to take a phone call real quick, like outside, come back, get in the exact same position. And as I go to load a beer in the fridge, I felt this wetness. And it took me about 2 seconds of standing just like this and realized that I just put my hand through their wedding cake. They had loaded it into the fridge while I was outside. So it's an hour before the ceremony. The only person near me is the grandmother. So I am everything's going through my mind. I just ruined a wedding. I'm probably out a couple of grand. Everyone's going to hate me. They're going to blanket my company with bad social media reviews. The venue owner's never going to allow me back in this place, right? So welling up with tears, I walk up to the grandma and I say, I'll never forget it. I say, listen, the money, everything else, we can talk about that afterwards. I'll give you all the time that you need. But I just put my hand through the wedding cake and I want to know how I can help, what you'd like to do with it. And this woman didn't skip a beat. She goes, oh my God, we're going to cut that thing up and eat it anyway. Who cares? She went and got some baby's breath from the florist, stuck it on the back of the cake. She goes, there, who cares? And I gave her a big old hug. And I will never, ever, ever forget that story as long as I live. That woman was an absolute saint. Something's going to go wrong. It's how you react to it.
Honestly, that is just peak advice. It's amazing. And we always say, like, calm is contagious. And it is so true about the reactions. And we, as event pros, have a lot of control over that. So, what a good story. I think that one's going to stick with me. So, thank you so much for that one. And before we do end, we've learned so much from you today. Where can listeners find you if they want to follow along with you or with your company? Where can they reach out?
Yeah, so our umbrella company is City Cocktails. We're kind of still working on that. We're gonna, my eventual expansion hopefully is gonna go coast to coast, and we name our brands after the city nicknames. So Emerald City Cocktails, Rose City Cocktails, Tree City Cocktails, stuff like that. We do most of I do most of our social media stuff via M City Cocktails on Instagram. That's a great way to keep track. I'm always putting fun stuff on there because events are fun. If you want to know about specifically the Seattle cocktail scene, I wrote a book last year called Seattle Cocktails for HarperCollins. It's got the background of all the big names in the cocktail scene out here. And after I wrote that book, I took I think I slept for 2 weeks and I swore I'd never write another book. And maybe a month later, HarperCollins called me up and said, "Hey, can you write another one that's going to be 3 times as long?" And I said, "Let's do it." So I have a new book coming out, hopefully later this year, maybe early next year, that's called Drink the Pacific Northwest, where I interview and talk to alcohol producers from Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Vancouver, BC. We are in the editing phase now. I am extremely proud of this book. It took me months and months and months to complete. I met some amazing people. And let me first just say that they pay me a flat rate, so I don't make royalties on this. So buy the book, don't. Check it out from the library. I don't care. But look out for Drink the Pacific Northwest from HarperCollins this year. I think you'll really, really, really enjoy it. There's a lot of cool people doing very cool things out here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil. We appreciate you taking the time.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Logan and Mary, for having me on. I really appreciate it. First podcast.
Woo, you crushed it.
Thank you.
And Mary, I have the bonus tip this week. So I'm just going to jump right into it. It doesn't have anything to do really with what Neil was saying, but hopefully you took some notes, listeners. But my bonus tip is at your registration for your next event, if you are printing name badges, you might have a printer handy. Make sure you don't forget regular white printer paper. I think you're going to need it for last minute signage, for event docs. I had it recently where I had to print shipping labels for vendors who needed to ship things home with them. And I just feel like I always remember the special paper or the stickers I need for the name tags. But I have multiple times now been like, ooh, if only I had some white printer paper. So don't forget it.
I love it. Important, always important. Great bonus tip. And thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast today. If you'd like to follow us, you can on most social media platforms at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can visit our website at bettereventspod.com. And you can also connect with us on LinkedIn directly. For Logan and I, we'd love to see you all coming through our connection. So please do that. And thank you so much again for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. And we will be back with you again next Wednesday.